Today, my guest is Taylor Hack, a top REMAX agent and industry innovator from Edmonton, Alberta. Taylor shares how AI isn't just a tool, it's a collaborative partner that enhances productivity, communication, and client service. From leveraging custom GPTs to mastering human connections in a tech-driven world, this episode is packed with insights for you looking to stay ahead. Ready to level up? Let's get into it. Are you a real estate agent eager to unlock the power of AI to boost your productivity and scale your business? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to Real Estate AI Flash, the weekly podcast that takes AI from a buzzword to a business tool, making it approachable and actionable for agents like you. I'm your host, Rajiv Sajja, and each week I interview agents from across the country who are using AI to transform their careers. Join us on this journey to become an AI skilled agent and take your real estate career to the next level. Now let's get to this episode. Welcome to another episode, Real Estate AI Flash, and we got someone from the other side of the pond almost. He is from Edmonton, Alberta. Taylor Hack is a team lead of Hack and Company at REMAX River City, and he is the most reviewed real estate team. That's interesting on rankmyagent.com. Not surprising at all if you know to get to know Taylor. He's a passionate entrepreneur and is considered notable within the real estate industry for his creative business solutions and strategy. In less than 3 years, this is very impressive, Taylor, broke into the top 2% of REMAX agents in the world and has obviously appeared on stage throughout North America. And he is on our virtual stage talking AI on the pod. Welcome, Taylor.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. And if you're saying from the other side of the pond and you're referring to Edmonton, well, the pond is frozen. We're about the furthest point north in North America where you can find 1 million people in one place.
There it is. Yeah. I've never been to Alberta, but I've been to Canada. So it's one of my goals to come to Alberta. But I'd love for the listening audience, before we dig into AI and stuff, I gave you a very little intro there, quick intro, if you mind. So if you could give us your backstory, how did you get into real estate and bring us to today?
Really, it kind of felt like a natural progression overall. I was very entrepreneurialistic, I guess is the nice way to say. As a kid, I was a handful, right? I was always kind of running a hustle in some form or another. A friend of mine, actually, we were running a very rudimentary skip the dishes back when you had to put a map on your lap and cell phones were new, right? We were delivering for restaurants that didn't offer delivery. And so there's a lot of attempts like that, even coming out of what was an education, I guess, because I was a high school dropout. I just the system really didn't have a place for me. Now, later, I challenged my GED. I was able to do the things that allowed me to eventually get into real estate, but it wasn't the conventional way. However, my real estate career kind of was conventional. My first sales gig was selling appliances. And the things that I got from that were really key to what I do now. I was talking to families. They were negotiating with me directly. I would see something that is actually pretty hard to see. And that's that most people are not doing a good job of communication within their own relationship under stress. So picking that up at 17 years old was something that I took with me to my next adventure, which was selling cars. I was too young to sell cars. I remember having the meeting for the interview and I frustrated the sales manager. He was like, I can't teach 40-year-olds how to follow up like you do, but now I got to go to the owner and tell him why I hired you. He's like, do you have a car? You're not trying to get this job just so we'll give you a car, right? I'm like, no, I've got a car. He's like, do you live with your parents? You got to actually need the money. It's 100% commission. And I'm like, no, I live in an awful little house that I'm renting with a friend or 2 other friends.
Yeah.
And so he hired me and it worked. It was right when I got in there that I started to compete with real adults that were trained and I was doing well against them. So from there, it ended up being somebody I sold a car to that asked me to come and join them at a major bank as a mortgage specialist. And then I went on about $150 million of mortgages. That's how many I funded in my 8-year career. But near the end of it, I was really suspect of realtors. The thing that I was frustrated about was these meetings I would have that would be helping families achieve their goal in real estate while still delivering 18 summers to their kids. Like, understood the assignment. And we had these great strategies. And then they would choose an agent that was like the friendliest person from their barbecue, like no litmus test at all. And some lady would essentially lose their money. Like, they would just literally run into somebody who was a great agent who would wipe the floor with their representation. And then the great strategy that we put forth would change. And I would see how it stole vacations from children. And at that point, they really couldn't keep me out. I was coming over the fence. And when you talk about like my first 32 months, I had made over $1 million. And in that, I was out to get people. Like, I didn't want to just win. I wanted to beat them. I didn't understand that was my first expression. And since then, I've very much softened on that. But man, in the beginning, I was a monster. I was out to help families, and I had not a lot of empathy for other agents. And now I'm here, hopefully to talk to other agents and help them kind of see that this is a community, and you got to continue to feed the people that are willing to learn, because you'd way rather do business with them.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. You mentioned your journey from, deliveries to mortgages to real estate, and obviously, and cars in the middle of that. And all of that was, I think it helped you prepare you for this moment, right? And it really did. And obviously, your initial journey of real estate to where you are now, obviously, you really learned a lot of skills to become the number 2, team in REMAX in that journey that you're on. So that's amazing. I mean, I think there's a lot of learnings there, subtle learnings from what you just shared with your background. So obviously, this is an AI pod. Mm-hmm. To talk a little bit about real estate and AI. And, as we're recording this, GPT 4.5 just dropped. Okay. But going back to November 30th, 2022, what was your first light bulb moment with AI? And when you thought it was like, this is going to be bigger than just another piece of gadget?
That kind of part of the story is more based on what else I kind of have hung around with. Like, I hang around with some people in tech, and some of those people work with NASA, and some of those people work in advanced quantum computing. And with that, you end up seeing much further in advance that other people see. Like, I had some time with a guy named there's a few people that come to mind, but definitely Ted he's the futurist at Paramount, talking to him about how he saw our phones as being a third arm, but AI as being a second mind. That really drove it home from me. There's a few other instances, but at that point, I had already been using non-AI efficiency tools to basically win in real estate. So one of the things I did was text replacement. We send text messages repeatedly all the time, hundreds and hundreds of them. You type at 22 words a minute with your thumbs, right? That easily multiplies, and it takes up all your time. Yeah. So if you turned your most commonly used texts into 5-digit codes and then memorized that, over the year, I was actually saving about a work week against my competition. And I want to parallel that because most of the things that we're seeing in AI are actually kind of this. They're non-AI tools, right? Like, we're seeing a lot of things marketed in AI that aren't actually AI at all.
Yeah.
And so that was where I started to glance in and start do my first experiments. Eventually, I ended up taking a prompt engineering course through a company called the AI Exchange. Yeah. And then after that, I just tunneled. I tunneled to, 400 or 700 pages in notes. And that was where I really learned there's so many limits. You know what the worst thing about AI is? That the knowledge base came from all of us. It came from the best and the worst of us. And it came most often from the loudest of us. Like this library, even if it had the best librarian, kind of an odd library.
And that's where I think, to your point, very well said there. I think that's where, to the point, if become more skilled with AI, which is really the journey of this pod, is make real estate agents or AI approachable and actionable for agents. If you're skilled with AI, you know how to call out the signal, look at the signal versus the noise, right? And you don't put your mind on autopilot. Your mind has to be involved in how it's going to help you get to the finish line faster and quicker in many cases, right? But the humanizing of the content, I think it's very important to know that AI models are getting faster, are getting better. This is the worst AI we'll ever use. But still, you need to understand where it fits in. So let's kind of dive into some specific use cases, Taylor, that most of our listening audience is agents. Some of them are obviously broker owners, brokerage leaders, etc. But what are some specific use cases? How would you go about if I'm an agent listening to this pod, and you've been obviously using AI, probably more advanced than most agents we talk to? How do you begin your journey? Give them a little bit of a roadmap, and then we'll get to some use cases.
I would actually look at talking back and forth with it as the way to get to know it.
Yeah.
The voice function's pretty good. And if you were to get nothing else out of artificial intelligence, getting a companion to collaborate with is incredibly valuable. In fact, possibly the most valuable use of AI is to say, hey, listen, I'm planning my day right now. Can you ask me questions until we have all of the tasks, and then help me organize that into priorities and then into my schedule? And then it'll come back, right? That's a good way to kind of play catch with it. You can take that further. Like for me, eventually what I wanted is it to know more about me. So then I looked into what it took to make a custom GPT. And realized that following the instructions, you never do it with IKEA, but just do it for one time. Followed the instructions, and I made a custom GPT. And what I got to put in there was a little bit about my business, and a little bit about what my ideal client profile was, a little bit about my market, just a few key things, so that way, when I was talking to this version of AI, it would know what I meant. Right? We needed more context.
Yeah.
And then after doing that a little while, I found that I was talking to this all the time, but it was kind of dry. And so I thought about who would be the best assistant? What's the best example I could find anywhere? And then I flavored it, and I chose Donna from Suits. Donna is probably the best assistant out there. And so I asked my custom GPT to start importing personality traits and stylistic speaking from Donna from Suits. And so that's who I talk to in the morning on my drive to work.
So you probably say, you open up ChatGPT and say, hey, Donna. Right?
Yep.
I mean, you give it a personality. So interesting you mentioned the voice.
Makes it easier to talk to.
What's that? I'm sorry?
It makes it easier to talk to.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, humanizing.
Can I take this idea one level up just because we're on a stream?
Yeah.
Later, I started to look around at the experts, like the C-suite executives in all the companies that I feel exhibit the values that my company does. This is a real reason to work out like a charter, like your values and understanding what your niche and your ideal client is. Those things are important because then you can look around and be like, man, if I was picking a football team of the executives that could bring me to the next level, who would I bring in? Yeah. And I couldn't pass up Bob Iger from Disney, right? He picks up people's babies, like Pixar from Steve Jobs or Lucasfilms from George Lucas. So he had to be my co-CEO. But then there's some things that I already kind of follow along with, like Donald Miller from Building a Story Brand. So he had to be my chief marketing officer.
Yeah.
And then I was looking around at who did really slick stuff for client experience and for tech. And there was Tony Zhu from DoorDash. And I just went around, and there's a book that I really like for managing finances for real estate. And it's called Profit First. And it's from Mike, good luck pronouncing his last name, Michalowicz or something like that. But anyway, I kind of took him on as a CFO. So now when I'm working in these different when I'm putting on these different hats in my business, because we just go around over and over again,
Yeah.
my highest value as a CEO is to be able to transition my mind from one task to the next without leaking how I feel about this task or what this is bringing to the next. So being able to rotate through my custom GPTs of the best executive officers and then changing who I'm talking to and what I'm talking about and having them pull more from me, I think that that's where I'm at now with humans and machines.
Yeah, no, that's a very good analogy. I think I've built obviously several GPTs just like yourself. And I think having intelligent, smartest people that you admire in a certain field be sort of co-intelligence to kind of give you that input and be a sounding board for what you're doing, I think is a great way to think about AI. I feel like most people think AI is like an assistant. I think you're shortchanging the role of AI if you don't think of it as a thought partner and a strategist.
Thought partner is good, and then assistant is where you want to do more testing. Like what I found once I started to kind of dig into prompt engineering was that my results wouldn't be consistent against all of the things that I would feed in, because most of the time people are feeding their inputs almost like they're just feeding it into like a shredder. Like they're just dumping information and being like, do magic is the prompt. But what I found is if you do that and you're looking for consistent outcomes, like let's say that you want to develop a prompt to review condo documents and to tie parallels from the reserve fund study or engineering report to the reserve fund plan, budget and financials and through the unit numbers. This is really achievable now. But because the input is so varied, like some condo docs or some condo companies are professionally run, some are like by the owners group, the way that you would be feeding different things in there would almost be like trying to fill a vehicle with unleaded and then going to try to fill it with diesel and then trying to plug it in Tesla style. Like you're not going to get the results you want.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to your point, though, I think if you give it examples, if you see this in the data, do this, and give as much granularity and detail. And I've done this with a few custom GPTs based on for research. Like if you can find, so I have, interestingly enough, Taylor, I built a podcast prep GPT.
Cool.
So all it does is I just give it, I'm interviewing Taylor Hack. He's my next guest. And if I have a website for you, I throw it in there. If I have a LinkedIn profile, I throw it in there. And it goes and does my research and gives me a nice little intro, 5-6 lines, because it's trained to do one task, which is bio, podcast intro, some key questions I can ask you based on real estate AI and your background that meld that. And then it also gives me some titles I could potentially consider for my podcast. That's the role of my GPT, right?
That's
so
great.
I think to your point, though, I think it's important. And I've been talking a lot about doing a little bit of a time audit for people. Like if you do a time audit in a week, things you do that take a lot of your time, and also layer in energy. Does it drain your energy to do this stuff? Or do you enjoy doing it as much? Like, does it energize you? So put all that stuff into the GPT and it'll actually tell you, you should tackle this first and AI can possibly help you with this. So I think kind of finding tasks like that would be helpful for agents.
See, this is where my mind goes to who over how, because I think like, who do I want them to bring knowledge from? Who's the expert here? So I look at it like Uber ride scores. So when you ride in an Uber, the Uber driver rates you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when I'm trying to solve the thing that you're trying to solve right now, which is where am I spending my time? I think it's such a valuable problem to solve. If you show me where you spend your money and where you spend your time, I will tell you who you are.
Yeah.
Now, the person that I feel like I would want the best input from is Daniel Pink, the author of When. He really talks in circadian rhythm and like giving your hardest tasks to the toughest version of you. Like I know from reading that book and from measuring and managing, like you're talking about, that if I really want to feed it to the Taylor wood chipper, like if it's something that I'm worried about grinding through, the 10 a.m. Taylor is the toughest one to deal with, right? So that's where I want to position these like higher value tasks that take more out of me.
Yeah, definitely.
So that would be something that I know that it's kind of a left-handed approach, and that's, I guess, what I'm known for, is to say now, who can we flavor this with? Who's the
Yeah.
best contributor to the knowledge base that's going to give us the highest Uber ride score? Like when you were saying your podcast prep tool, I'm like, what if we flavored that with D-Rock, the guy who worked with Gary Vee?
Yeah.
Right? Would he then be giving you more valuable things, or possibly you would talk to him before the podcast and be like, okay, what do I need to know about Taylor that I should hit in the first 3 minutes of the podcast?
For sure, for sure. And I think that's where I was going next is once you do the time audit, then you align yourself with based on the type of tasks you're doing. Let's say one of them is podcast prep. The person you want to bring into that intelligence on that GPT is the person you admire and respect who kills it with podcasts, right? As an example, to your point of Daniel Pink or all these roles we've talked about. So I think the people we admire are everywhere. We read books and we know who those people are, listen, kind of building brands, etc. But if you don't know what the problem you're trying to solve, you're just going to kind of get a little bit out of AI. You're not going to get deep into AI in terms of solving things in terms of productivity. Anything else you want to add to that, Taylor?
My mind's going, my mind's made up of magnets, and where I'm stuck right now is, you know how there's that app that is Cameo where you can get like a custom message? Could we get a custom GPT of all these experts? Can we get a library of like Gary V's productivity GPT so I can just talk to Gary? Can it actually have his voice? This is what I want from the internet right now. Like if I can order some stuff, if you can make custom GPTs and program them deep enough that it would almost be like a consultation with the actual person, man, that would be sick.
It would be sick. And I think we'll probably get so close that we'll be ready for a tush push. Mm-hmm. Again, I had to say that just because I'm an Eagles fan and they recently won the Super Bowl. But I do think, to your point, though, I think the more data you feed about Gary Vee, let's just take Gary Vee for an example, about all his he's got stuff all over the internet with his voice, right? In terms of the intelligence, I think you need to curate that a little bit. But if you give it all that intel, I think you can get real close to Gary Vee's GPT, right? You can build one on your own.
Gary's a good example, though, because he is a curator.
Yeah.
Like he's the first one to admit that none of the ideas are original. But it's a collection. It's a playlist you want. Yeah. And the DJ is like a really powerful position. But powerful positions is also where my mind goes when I zoom out. So when we think about like the powerful positions of the past, I believe in my grandparents' generation, it was the problem solver. Yeah. That was a very valuable position, right? But then when I look at my parents' generation and leading into my generation, man, the problem spotter with an X factor was wickedly valuable. Like, think about there was a few people that were standing around realizing that there's never been two people like us that had a conversation about what a great cab ride they just had. Mm-hmm. As soon as they saw a problem that you could solve now with tech that couldn't be solved before, and what the magic thing there was location services on mobile phones.
Yeah.
They created a solution that no one else could see, and it was incredibly valuable. So that problem spotting in a world where you can crowdsource the solution to anything is like a key position. But now, when I think about casting forward to my children, I play this game with my daughter, Margot. And I ask her when she comes into the garage when we park, if she can make it all the way to the door without the light sensor catching her. Okay? I did this with other thought methods. Like when my children would run into the footstool, I would teach them to go around physically, and then later I would teach them to go around. With meditation, I would teach them to hold their breath in the bath, and then we would bring that to follow your breath later. And now I'm teaching them to see the blind spots in the machine. That's going to be the most valuable spots in the future. Like if you can see where the machine needs you, the power of you teaming up with the machine in those spots is going to be unparalleled.
That's a very great takeaway right there. I think that is the skill. If you become skilled with AI, I think you'll be able to team up more, deeper, and obviously that the puck is moving on that too, right? Needless to say, with all the advancements with AI. So one question before I get to my final two that I ask all my guests, Taylor, in terms of you've been obviously deep into AI and kind of testing, implementing certain things in your workflow. How much productivity enhancement, just if you had to take a guesstimate on time or resources that you feel like pre-AI versus with AI, based on wherever you've incorporated? Obviously, you're not incorporated in everything you're doing, but whatever areas you've incorporated, have you can you put a number on that percentage?
It'd be so tough because how I'm measuring it is like a compounding effect.
Yeah.
So when you take a look at every email template that I wouldn't have the energy to do because I was doing it like late in the day on top of appointments, but sure, because I'm working with my CMO, Donald Miller from Storybrand, I just like, he brings enough to me that if I was lifting the bar, like if we were talking bench press style, it's your trainer with two fingers that keeps you getting those extra reps, right?
Yeah.
And this part is so invaluable to me that it's tough. Or going to my new website. I wanted a website to do specific things, and I wouldn't have approached it myself, especially like running automations into my CRM. I wouldn't have done it, but I actually, it makes my mind think of those cyclists. You know, when you go downtown in almost any city and you see these people that look like business people, but they're wearing a cyclist helmet, so they think they're invincible. That's me with Chat GPT. I'm just whipping into traffic, man. Like I'll build that website. I'll troubleshoot this automation.
Superhuman powers. Superpowers.
Yeah,
for sure. So this has been great conversation. I think my key takeaways really are around how do you bring the best and the brightest people into your room, leveraging their intelligence to produce better work than you've ever produced. You know, and I think that is sort of like a high level takeaway, but I'd love to ask you a couple of questions as we wind down the pod. One is, you've been in real estate 3 years, 4 years now?
No, 12 years.
12, I'm sorry, 12 years. Okay. 12 years. So if you were to start today, Taylor, or your younger self, what is the one piece of advice you'd give that the listening audience can take that to heart?
It's a couple of things. So if you look at that, if you watch that movie Moneyball, you can see that people that get on base are the people that score more than the people that hit home runs. Yeah. So you're going to feel jealous of the people that hit home runs. You're going to run into the Barry Bonds of your real estate career, and they're just going to smoke it out of the park. But you'll notice once you've been in real estate for over a decade, the people that continually get on base are the most valuable players out there. You got to think marathons in your career and not sprints. But it feels like a sprint in the beginning. But in it's hard to understand how to know the right stuff. So that's where you really have to look for networks. Yeah. I like coaching networks. Yeah. You know, when you're in business for someone else, they are benefiting from developing you. But when you're in business for yourself, it's up to you to develop you. And all the coaches worth their salt charge. And most of them charge a lot. Yeah. And so that's what I look at is you have to skill build yourself. You don't want to scale anything that's no good. Like if you're only closing 1 out of 10 every 10 listing appointments, you don't want to scale that. You don't want to put marketing behind that and multiply that number. You have to get better at listing appointments before you scale it out. So look internally first, but look for guidance because you don't know what you need to learn. The skills that are actually the important ones are tricky to see from the beginning. Yeah, great advice. Great advice. So the final question is, you shared a book earlier, Profit First, right? Mm-hmm. But is there I don't know if you are a big podcast person or you listen to more pods or read more, but either one, if you had to recommend one that has really deeply impacted your career to date, pod or book, what would that be? Influenced by Dr. Robert Cialdini. They did a revised version. The book is 20 years in. Understanding what compels people to do things. Maybe if you wanted like something that's a real now version of some of the same fundamentals, it might be $100 million offers by Hormozi. I haven't read either. I'm going to add that to my list. Yeah. So the whole thing is when you talk to the market, you have to make offers that people feel silly about not accepting. Yeah. By the time you're in real estate for 2 years, if you can't inspire confidence in strangers in the first meeting, it's over.
It's over. Yeah.
Right? So understanding the skill of sales, it's more valuable now than ever before. Human connection has kind of diminished since technology has risen. And that, like, once you get in front of them is where most realtors fail.
Yeah.
And the other thing is just understanding that you want to scale quality. So you should really be measuring so you can manage.
That's excellent. You know what? One of my first jobs, Taylor, I'll end with this. When I walked into my first job and my first day at my boss's office, he had this big poster at the back of his wall. Said, if you can measure it, you can manage it. Right. So it's like some of those truths that never go away. So I appreciate your time, Taylor. And for those of you that are listening, we'll include a link to Taylor's LinkedIn, all his social stuff in the show notes. And if you know someone in Edmonton, Alberta, or surrounding areas, make sure you look up Taylor, and he would absolutely take care of your clients and then some. So Taylor, appreciate you. And I'm sure we'll see each other in person at some point here on our real estate journey.
I sure hope so. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Cheers.
Cheers. You made it to the end. Nice. My goal with this podcast is to elevate your AI skills every week. If you found value in the show, your goal is to follow, share with a fellow agent, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and leave us a review, as it helps us reach more agents like you.